Hello?
Yo, hello, Bert.
Yo, man, what's going on?
I need to unmute myself.
What are you guys?
Hey guys.
What's up, guys?
I have never done a call like this before. This is swanky. Well done, Fonzas.
Yeah, every time I watch, because I've watched all of the ones you guys have done together, I'm like, how did he even set that up? It's so fucking cool.
It's really cool. People can ask questions and stuff. So
Yeah, but it's cool to have everyone here and to be able to allow people to talk, which is awesome.
How are you guys feeling today?
great.
Maybe sad.
I think I have a different perspective than the rest of the world. I don't know if you saw the video I posted, but it was kind of like just a quick little 5-minute basically saying like, don't panic, like it's gonna be okay. But the Doomer memes are fucking hilarious.
Dude, the memes are so good.
They are incredible, and you killed our class, Sarthe.
Dude, it's not me, man. Okay, all right, I'm gonna make a video about how strong warlocks are. Don't worry. It's gonna be fine. Don't worry, I'm going to make a video on warlocks.
You got it all.
I got
planned,
this.
Right?
It's gonna be fine. Like I'm just gonna do some math later, and we can show them it's really fine. Like nothing major. Just lose a few % of damage, but should mostly still be competitive.
Rugs, why do you think this is not that bad?
It's not going to play out in the long term to be all that like super doom and gloom, because Unholy is still, without the snapshot, it's still going to do phenomenal. It's still going to do it's moving from like an S+++ tier to an S tier DPS. It's still S tier. It's still going to be an incredible very strong class. Do we stack it like bring 15 unholy DKs to kill a boss? No, that would be ridiculous. Absolutely not. Maybe we're stacking a different class. Maybe that ridiculous parse brain mentality to do something, it turns into an affliction warlock meta. Maybe that is true, but that doesn't mean that we need to like straight reroll, like delete our unholy DKs. They were not nerfed into the ground, into the garbage completely. That's insane talk. They are still extremely good.
Yeah, for sure. Like you would have to consider like all the burst windows and stuff. But this is not necessarily that bad, because like if you're not snapshotting, right? For example, next like you said, if you can just use the procs while you have Gargle up already, it's basically just makes it easier for you, because you wouldn't have to like wait for the procs before you can cast it, right? So it's not necessarily all bad for situations like that.
Although you're still waiting for some right? Like you're still waiting for your ICD of let's say like Dark Moon Card Greatness, because you want that to proc and snapshot into we lose the value of attack power some, and that trinket now might not be as insane because we lose so much value of attack power, right? But you still don't want like to accidentally proc all of, if you have other haste things, which I guess everything's now really in control because you're not using Signet. You're not. Who cares about metagem anymore?
Yeah, metagem is like,
you can switch on black magic whenever you need.
Black magic swapping, I was actually going to talk about that, is basically pointless now, because you would have to swap. You would have to swap once to equip it during your goggle, and then you would have to swap back, right? So first of all, that's basically a GCD, a half GCD, of course, because it's 1.5 second swap. So let's just consider that minor. It's not important, but you would cancel your melee swings, right? So you would lose some DPS on your melee swing, sorry, twice instead of once. So, and black magic itself is how much? It's 10%. It's 10% haste for 10 seconds. So that's actually 3% haste, basically 3.3% haste for your gargle, which is not even one cast, basically. So you're losing some melee damage to get one cast, but the melee damage and the cast damage you're going to gain is basically going to compensate each other. So it's basically going to be pointless. There's no reason to do this. At best, it would be like something like 20 DPS. At worst, you would lose like 20 DPS. So basically, no reason to do it. And black magic is actually pointless now.
If we look at this is like semi-copium, but if we look at most fights right now, other than if you're aggressively stacking unholy DKs, like warlocks are winning most situations, unless you're aggressively stacking unholy DKs, which is like the parse meta, and it's like nothing can even come close to beating that. So this nerf, I'm curious to see how we're gonna see DK in the meta, and if, because in classic WoW we have a tendency to stack classes if they're the strongest, if we see a massive shift away from Unholy more than we would normally, seeing them like drop from number 1 spot to like number 5 spot, if that just means you completely shift to like Warlock, Rogue sort of meta.
I mean, in my opinion, like Unholy stacking in the first place wasn't really a thing in Ulduar because like there's not many fights that you would benefit from having Unholy, especially early on, right? So like Unholy wouldn't really be better than Frost, for example, on most of the fights. Like Mimiron, take for example, there's a lot of movement. You wouldn't get Bloodlust on a good timing, and on top of that, you're coming from next, so your gear for Unholy is extremely scuffed. So you wouldn't really perform better. So there wouldn't be really a situation where you would stack Unholy TKs, for example, in Ulduar, and even later, like. Sure, Unholy does like a bit more damage, but what's the point of stacking them? I don't really get it. Like, if the class does like 300 more DPS, but why would you even stack them? Like, what are you trying to achieve? So like in Ulduar, like all the classes and like all the specs, in my opinion, are really competitive and like all relevant. So I don't really see a point of stacking, but you might disagree.
I think when it comes to the maybe not average player, but the semi-hardcore player who's in a semi-hardcore guild, a lot of times they're going to have somewhere in the ballpark of 3 to 5 DK DPS in their raid. And right now, it is agreed upon meta to have 1 Frost DK and then the rest Unholy. And I still anticipate that to still be the case, even post-nerf. That shouldn't change. So like the stacking of Unholy DK should still be the same for the red players out there who are playing this class. It's at like this ridiculous like 0.1% people who think that they can speed run and who do speed runs and want to go like send literally, I'm not even joking, like 18 Unholy DKs at Patchwork because they think it's funny. Like that might change, sure. But DK at its core and its strength in a situation like Ulduar has always been because they're extremely good on every single fight, because they both specs, Frost and Unholy, both do really good effective cleave damage, and they are invincible. They do not die to shit. They are always alive on every single encounter, and they do really good damage, and that is true the entire expansion.
Yeah, for sure. But like, yeah, I don't see like why we choose, for example, Unholy over Frost, like in Ulduar, for example. The difference is like not right now. Unholy won't even be better than Frost because like if we take a look, like if we sim for 5 minutes,
early.
yeah, especially early. But like even later on, like we're simming like this. If you take a look at my stream, I'm simming like the old Unholy, like with the old gargoyle, like, right? And this is on 5 minutes. Then we take Frost. Where's Frost? Let me find Frost. So this is Frost with 4 set. Let's just sim in Unholy sub Unholy, right? Even though it's not working correctly, like the numbers are a bit crunched, like the sim is not done. But whatever, we're just going to sim like this. Like this is 800 DPS difference, right? So 800 DPS difference with the old Unholy on 5 minutes. But this doesn't take into consideration all the mechanics, all the movement, because Unholy suffers more on movement. Doesn't take into consideration, for example, like Burst Cleave, for example. Take Mimiron, right? I'm not sure if D&D hits all of the 3 targets, but it didn't used to. So like on a fight like that, like Frost would perform better, for example. And then on top of this, you're losing like 700 DPS now from the Unholy change, right? And on top of this, this considers like basically a perfect snapshot. So I don't really see Unholy doing better, like even before. And even now, it's just going to be the same at best and like just slightly worse at basically on average than Frost DK is going to be. Especially considering Frost DK is easier to play and executes most of the time on fights with a lot of movement. So I kind of disagree with you saying that Unholy is going to be better and should be like stacked over Frost, but like the difference is not that big anyways.
The difference is definitely very small. You can basically play whichever spec you want in this next phase is how I see it. But I disagree. I still think Unholy is better than Frost on most situations.
Do you think early on? So early on, most guilds were probably going to bring more Frost DKs anyways, right? Like as Unholy, you had to play around your ICDs and play around making sure you can get a really good snapshot, because that's the only thing that mattered, right? That's what you were there for. You're there for like usually like the big burst windows, or like obviously on like the cleave fights, it's really nice. But now it's like with where Frost is versus where Unholy is, I think most people potentially opt for a lot of Frost early on, because Frost doesn't scale nearly as well. You've got like your God sigil already and everything like that, right? So like Frost is just going to be a big thing. Oh, and we saw that with a lot of the guilds that were progressing in Ulduar on the PTR the first time around, where they were already bringing a lot of Frost, especially the Alliance guilds. Now that brings that gap a lot closer.
But what do you mean early on? Because early on, like, what are the checks that like you want to hit? The checks would be like killing XT Heart. Unholy beats Frost there on that burst, or killing Phase 3 Iron Council. Unholy beats Frost there on Phase 3. Algalon, like Unholy is so good on Algalon because it's a Lust opening fight. There's like no other fight in Ulduar where you're opening with Lust except for maybe Ignis XD. Unholy wins on like all these quote unquote like early like tough challenges that your guild might have before you start farming Ulduar. The only one that like Frost obviously wins on is Hodier.
Yeah, I mean, sure. I mean, yeah, like the burst windows for sure. Like Unholy's going to win. I mean, not really that by that much now, because the gargoyle is doing like quite a bit less damage, but should
For
slide
sure.
a bit. But like I'm talking like overall damage, like on bosses like Mimiron, for example, right? Like there is no burst windows, they're just damage. Like Unholy's not going to win on Mimiron most likely, unless like you get lucky with like Bloodlust and stuff. But like on that fight, even before, like I showed here, like with perfect execution, you would be like 800 DPS in front of Frost, right? With perfect Bloodlust, with Bloodlust on pull and everything, which is not the case anymore. I mean, which wouldn't be the case on Ulduar, on Mimiron anyways. And now on top of that, you lose 700 DPS even in a perfect scenario, plus minus. So even in a perfect scenario, you're doing as much damage as Frost is doing on that duration. So like put like some mechanics, put some movement, put some delayed bloodlust, some cringe stuff. You basically your Gary dies because it can die in the flames. Your army dies and you're not performing as well as you would. So sure, on the burst windows would win, but like on the other stuff it wouldn't really.
Yeah, my boy. What up, Gog?
Not much, just reeling from the mess that is this change.
All right, tell us your thoughts. Tell us your thoughts.
I mean, so in the long run, it's not that big of a change, really, right? Like, Whitewolf kind of hit it on the head where it's going to be a very minimal change based on how much damage we're already doing.
Mm-hmm.
It's definitely not a very smart change on Blizzard's part. There's a lot of better ways they could have made this nerf to immediately affect how much damage Unholy is doing without doing lasting damage to its scaling. It's kind of a, like, we've already hit the point where AP or haste scaling is basically plateaued, right? We've already got math on. Basically, gargoyle damage is only going to increase by about 18 to, I think it's like 23%, all the way from now until ICC, because its AP scaling is so bad and we're already reaching peak haste points. So it's a very weird choice to nerf it like this. In the long run, it's not going to do much in Ulduar, because you really weren't looking to stack Unholies anyway. They weren't looking very strong in these, in the early testing.
Yeah, like I said, Unholy was never going to be stacked in Ulduar anyways, so.
Yeah, like it's a spec that really relies on quick fights that have nothing else going on, and it's just not how Wrath fights work from now on. Like, they're going to be stronger in TOGC again, because there's going to be a couple of fights where you can cheese fight times, and there's no mechanics, but, like, Ulduar was never going to be the Unholy Death Knight, like, launch point, or like, their time to shine.
Yeah, it almost feels like Ulduar was always the Warlock stack raid. Always has been, always will be. And it's almost like this doomer talk about ditching Unholy and going Warlock is just people being late to the game.
Yeah, people, like, my guild is, like, already talking about heavy Warlocks. Most guilds are talking about heavy Warlocks. It was already an inevitability that Warlocks were just going to be so much stronger for Ulduar. All this does is reinforces the Warlock stack. Like, people are late to the party at this point.
Yep.
And Warlock has always been known to be better than Ulduar, especially on Yogg Zero. Like even in Private Zero, like years ago, like everyone was stacking Warlocks because they can just drain soul with their backs turned, and that's the only thing that matters on Yogg, right?
Yeah, the class is just so much better suited to the instance to begin with. Death Knights, if anything, with how Death Knights have kind of shuck out in Wrath Classic compared to normal, there was maybe a chance of seeing more Unholy play, just because there's the thought of maybe fights can get very quick with the item, like specifically because the item level like increases. There was maybe a thought, but there was never going to be, in Progress, Unholy was never going to be the best class or the best spec. Frost is just, it's more efficient damage when stuff is not shaking out how you want it to be. Unholy is very much reliant on like perfect positioning, perfect scenarios, perfect lust timings, whereas Frost just does good damage all the time whenever you need it to.
What I really don't like about this nerf is I agree with what you said, Deance, that this isn't the right way to do it if they were going to do it. This is kind of the dumb way to do it, but
It's
also
the dumbest way.
It's very dumb, but it's also dumb that they would step in. Now that they've stepped in, it's like anything it can go. Like, why aren't they buffing ferals? Ferals need a buff. Why aren't they buffing rets? Hello, rets are underplayed. Where was that forum
I don't
post?
know, Rugs.
you know,
I've
like
seen tier lists, and all tier lists for phase 2 say feral is S tier.
I'm just saying, like, the entire community can get on Blizzard's ass and they can't say anything about it because now they have full reign to ask for nerfs and ask for buffs because they've stepped in now. Like, now it's fair game. They should have just done nothing. And now it's like it's all fucked.
I mean,
It was a very odd choice. It's opened the floodgates for a lot of things that I don't think they like. The reason they said they didn't want to make these changes to begin with is because they were worried about opening those floodgates. That's always the answer we've gotten from like Agrand when we talk about buffing Ret or buffing Feral is always just like, oh, we're afraid if we make this one change, we're gonna have to commit to actually making changes as we go the entire way through for everyone. Like, those floodgates are now opened. Everyone's going to be asking for every change imaginable even more.
Yep.
I mean, if they were to buff Reds right now, they would have to nerf them in ICC because the Reds are based around ICC 2-set bonus, so like they can't really do much. So what would they do? Buff them now and then nerf them again? Or nerf Unholy now and buff it in ICC because it's worse? Like, that just doesn't make sense.
That's the issue, right? Like, the best way they could have nerfed Unholy, and the way we told them to, because spoiler alert to everyone, we kind of knew this nerf was coming a couple of days beforehand. It was leaked to us, and we've also been suggesting things to them for a while now. But like, our original suggestion to them was literally just cut Gargoyle Strike's damage in half right now. Just flat 50% less damage for each strike, and then buff the actual AP coefficient to it. So right now it does say half the damage, maybe 60% of the damage as it was. But as you go into scale into ICC, it scales more off of your strength and attack power, which actually goes up compared to haste, because we're basically hitting like the max amount of haste you're going to get for snapshots for the rest of the expansion. But our AP goes a lot higher because of strength scaling. So like, if they just nerf this, like the actual damage of the Gargoyle, and then buff its AP scaling, by the time we get to ICC, Gargoyle will be doing the amount of damage it should be in ICC, what it was balanced around, because we're playing ICC talents. And it's not nearly as overpowered now, because that's the big issue, is that we're basically getting like 80% of the damage you would be getting from a Gargoyle in ICC right now.
Yep.
Which just isn't how any other class works.
I'm surprised they didn't go with what Whitewolf was saying earlier about the
cap?
scripting of the interactions. No, of how things proc ICDs, like when you equip a weapon with Berserking or Black Magic, how that doesn't incur an ICD, or swapping your meta gem and things like that, and other stupid shit that we've done as Unholy.
Well, it's
like, I'm surprised they didn't do that.
Like,
because that does what they're basically setting out to do. They're doing one thing. They want to nerf Unholies, and they also don't want it to be like insanely degenerate.
Yeah,
and just like fixing that kind of does both things without like gutting Unholies like so much.
And that's the worst part, is that it's not behaving as it's supposed to be behaving. Like, they've already given us the guidelines on what they expect these GCDs to work like, and it doesn't work like that. They just haven't fixed it for some reason. I don't know if it's a limitation or if they ran out of time, because the holidays, like, we got pretty much confirmation that like the one person that was doing item level scaling on their team has been gone for the holidays, so that's why nothing has been fixed on like Comet's Trail still doesn't have the proper proc for its item level. It's still like set to the lower item level proc rate, and a bunch of weapons are still set to lower item level damage, just because they have one person on the team working on that. So like, I don't know if it's just the team is super understaffed, or if they just don't care, or if it's a limitation.
Yeah, it's an indie company, like people say.
Multi-dollar company.
They at least like they've changed some of those items now that they're back, right? Like, because everyone was gone for the holidays. They're adjusting some of them, but yeah, I agree. It is an interesting. I think they went with a change that affects Unholy throughout the rest of the game. I know that sentiment has been expressed on their side that if it's too much, they might revert it, or even if it's too much later, it might be reverted. Whereas if we see in like ICC, Unholies aren't doing well at all, right? They might revert it back to the way it was beforehand. Which would be interesting because then all of the DKs that might like switch over to being orcs have to go back to being trolls again and toe enjoyers. But I think they could have, yeah, like the suggestion you made, I think could have been a lot better, because it's not like right now we're going to scale too ridiculously. It's if we're at 80% of the gargoyle damage that we're supposed to have at the end of the game, then that's kind of insane. We're already so powerful right now, and we don't get like too much more haste scaling. We're at that kind of plateau. Then it should be attack power should really scale well with the gargoyle, and we should see ourselves getting stronger with gear. And that seems like a relatively easy change, and a great suggestion that you and probably the other people with the DK Discord kind of suggested directly to Blizzard before they even made this adjustment.
Yeah, I mean, like Unholy was never going to be good in ICC either way. Like whatever they said in the blue post, like they said Unholy is one of the strongest scaling classes.
It's still gonna be the strongest.
That just made me
overall.
laugh so much. Like I laughed for like half an hour straight. Like it was midnight. And like, but I don't know. Like Unholy was never going to top damage. Like you would just hit T9, you would do like really well in T9, and then once you hit ICC, like everyone starts getting gear, you're literally stuck in your T9 because no one's going to give you T10, right? Because the DPS difference is like 500-600 DPS at most when you have like your full 277 heroic T10 set bonus. And then if you went two-hander, you would lose DPS on top, so it would come back to the same damage as you would do if you were like you dual wielding with T9. So like there is literally no point in basically like Unholy would just be stuck in that lane. Like your T10, in T9 you would just hit the ceiling and sit there. Like the only upgrades you would get would be like your boots and stuff like that.
Yeah,
So,
like we've hit the problem where like the class is already, it plateaus very quickly. Like it's hitting its peak faster than any other class or spec, but it doesn't get much better from there. So this nerf just makes them worse now and also then worse later.
Yeah. I mean, it's supposed to be expected because like all the gear in ICT is basically armor pen based, and like you have like 30% physical damage. So what were you gonna do as Unholy? But now they've just basically like made it like a buff bitch basically, if I can say that. But like in ICC, you're just going to bring one Unholy for the even take buff, and that's it. Because like there is no they won't do that much damage compared to everyone else like later on a bit, like a few weeks into ICC. And like of course, like the AP coefficient, for example, we have a 0.4 attack power coefficient, right, on the gargoyle. It was balanced around the 27, like 30 casts of Gary was getting with a delay in ICC, because that was what it was, because it was buffed. I'm pretty sure in OG Wrath because it wasn't doing enough damage, so they buffed it around the delay they had in Wrath. So like right now we're getting like we were getting the Gary without delay and with the same coefficient, so it's obvious it was going to do a lot of damage. And add on top of that the 30-second fights we were getting, and it's normal. So I don't know.
There's some talk right now.
Sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
We have more people to ask questions. So yeah, please go ahead and finish your sentence things. Sorry to interrupt. And then we can get these people in.
So there's some reports that Gargoyle is now hitting harder on PTR than it was in live. So we've got a bunch of people currently like sitting on dummies with logs, trying to see if it's just chatters chatting or if they fuck something up with the actual AP coefficient again. So that's in the works right now. I personally think it's just people chatting and they don't actually know what they're looking at. But the thought of them accidentally buffing the AP coefficient when they're nerfing its haste scaling is... Oh, also the white attacks are still snapshotting haste. So like they did this in the worst possible way.
Wait, so you're still meleeing a ton?
It's still meleeing a ton, and its melee attacks are snapshotted with haste.
Oh my god!
Yeah,
stop meleeing.
It probably like works the same as army does, like from the melees. So it's probably like an army for the melees, like because it does comparable damage as well. So they most likely reuse the scripting. I'm not surprised.
Like that's in the works now. We'll figure that out as kind of time passes here. We're collecting logs from a bunch of people.
I mean, the poor intern that's working on this is probably suffering right now, but yeah.
The PR guy is also just losing his mind right now. I told Agron, I was like, you're gonna have so many DMs today.